What would you do if the man who vowed to protect your dreams became the very reason you stopped dreaming? The first time Claire told Thomas about her bakery idea, he laughed so hard he choked on his beer. They were sitting in their modest kitchen, the walls still echoing with the scent of cheap paint and yesterday's regret. She had just finished wiping flour from her fingers. Her hands always smelled of cinnamon and hope when she dared to speak the words aloud. "I want to open my own shop," she said. "A bakery. Something small at first." Thomas blinked at her, then burst into laughter. "Claire!" He scoffed between wheezes. "You burned toast." She didn't argue. Not because it was true, it wasn't, but because that wasn't the real reason he dismissed her. You see, when someone loves you, truly loves you, even your wildest ideas are taken seriously. He didn't laugh at the toast. He laughed at her, and in that moment, something fragile began to crack. Most women would have swallowed the pain, disguised it with a smile, and moved on. Claire did smile, but it wasn't real. It was the smile of a woman who had just been quietly erased. He changed the subject after that, talked about work bills, the car needing a new battery, life things, mundane things. But what he really wanted to talk about was how unrealistic she was, how foolish, how sweet, silly little Claire should know her place. And you might have missed it too. You might have thought, oh, he's just teasing. But there's a difference between a tease and a cut that doesn't bleed until later. Thomas was one of those men who believed marriage was ownership. Claire was the safe choice, beautiful in a quiet way, intelligent, but not loud about it. She cooked, cleaned, never raised her voice. In his eyes, she was the perfect wife, the kind that stayed small to make room for his ego. But Claire had secrets, not the kind you'd confess to a priest. No, hers were made of fire and buried under years of silence. Every late night she spent watching baking tutorials, every failed recipe she perfected, until it didn't fail. Those were her confessions, her quiet rebellion, her no whispered into the dark. And Thomas. He didn't notice. He couldn't see past his own shadow. When Claire stopped talking about her bakery, he assumed she had come to her senses. He called her my rock, praised her loyalty to his friends, joked about how lucky he was that she wasn't one of those ambitious wives. You want to scream at her, don't you? Tell her to run. But that's not how it works. Women like Claire don't leave. Not immediately, not loudly. First, they disappear from their own lives, piece by piece, until one day there's nothing left to lose, and that's when the fire starts. Years passed. 2 children, a mortgage, a routine so predictable it could lull even the most anxious heart into a coma. But underneath, Claire was fermenting. One day while folding laundry, she overheard her daughter playing pretend. "I am the mommy," the little girl said, mimicking Claire's soft tone. "And I stay home because I don't have dreams." Claire froze. That single sentence rang louder than any insult Thomas had ever hurled at her. "Do you feel that? That pulse in your chest? That tightness in your throat?" That's the moment the story shifts. That's the scream that never made it out, the scream that became a vow. That night, after Thomas fell asleep on the couch, snoring through his usual beer-fueled slumber, Claire sat in their kitchen again. Same table, same chair. But this time, she had a notebook. She wrote a list. 1, bake 10 original recipes. 2, sell at the farmer's market. 3, get a license. 4, rent a space. 5, never ask his permission. It wasn't dramatic, no tears, no grand music playing, just ink and resolve. She didn't tell him. Not when she woke up at 4 a.m. to bake. Not when she sold out of every single pastry her first weekend. Not when she used her own savings, the emergency fund she'd quietly built from babysitting, selling crafts, and tiny freelance gigs to file for her business license. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. The women who stop asking for permission become invisible to the men who need control. But you see, silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. By the time Thomas realized something had changed, it was already too late. Claire no longer rushed to greet him at the door. Dinner was warm, but not waiting. The house was still clean, but no longer spotless because time suddenly had become a currency she spent on herself. She started renting a small commercial kitchen 2 nights a week. While the rest of the world slept, Claire was awake, coaxing dough into golden crescents, weaving butter and grief into perfect, laminated layers. She moved like a woman possessed, but not by rage, by something deeper, older, a hunger to become whole. Thomas barely asked questions, and when he did, it was laced with mockery disguised as concern. "You've been really into this baking thing lately," he smirked. "Is it a midlife crisis, or are you just bored?" She smiled not sweetly but sharply. Maybe I'm just getting started." He laughed. Of course he laughed. Because men like him believe the punchline is always theirs. They don't notice when the room grows colder, when admiration turns to indifference, when silence becomes distance. But maybe you've been there too, haven't you? In a house where the floorboards remember every compromise you made, where your dreams are ghosts clinging to the wallpaper, and no one asks you who you are beneath the chores, the sacrifices, the quiet. Claire didn't argue anymore. That was her secret weapon. She let him underestimate her. Within 6 months, she had a name, Ember and Flower, a logo, a growing Instagram page filled with photos of her pastries, ethereal, elegant, alive. Women began messaging her mothers, daughters, tired professionals, all craving something more than food. They were buying a piece of her becoming. And still Thomas slept. One morning he noticed a strange envelope on the counter. Vendor deposit Ember and Flower, Spring Street Fair. He held it up baffled. "What's this?" Claire didn't flinch. "I'm a vendor at the fair next month. I'll need you to pick up the kids that Saturday." Thomas blinked. "Wait, you're serious? This whole thing's real." There it was. That look. The one that isn't shock or awe. It's threat. It's fear disguised as confusion. The moment a man realizes the woman he discounted has currency beyond his reach, he tried to soften it. "I mean, that's cute, babe. Just don't get your hopes up too much. These things never really go anywhere." Claire met his gaze and said nothing. But inside her chest a door had swung shut. Not slammed, not locked, just shut. Firmly, quietly, forever. The Spring Street Fair was the moment Ember and Flower became more than a passion. It became proof. She sold out in 4 hours. Women lined up for her lavender honey scones, whispered praises, asked where her shop was. A local food blogger tagged her. A local cafe owner begged her for a partnership. Claire stood in the center of it all, flower on her apron cheeks, flushed eyes bright, and smiled like a woman who had been told she would never fly, only to find she'd had wings all along. And still Thomas mocked it. "It's just a trend," he said. "You'll burn out. Better not quit your day job." But she had already put in her resignation. Effective in 2 weeks. The bakery lease had been signed that morning. The same day she found his phone left open on the table, a text from his coworker, Melissa. "She still doesn't know Loelle. You're awful. She's so vanilla. It's like she doesn't even exist." Claire didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even confront him. Because this wasn't betrayal. No betrayal is when you expect something sacred and receive poison. This was confirmation. Confirmation that he had never seen her, never heard her, only used her as a mirror to admire himself, and when she stopped reflecting him, he reached for someone who would. So what would you do if the man who mocked your dreams also gambled with your dignity? Would you fight for him? Or would you build something so grand, so undeniable that his approval became irrelevant? Claire chose the latter. Thomas didn't realize she was gone until the house no longer smelled like bread. Not just her body, her presence vanished. The soft clatter of baking pans at dawn, the humming in the kitchen, the small, gentle chaos of someone alive in their purpose, all of it gone. She hadn't left physically, not yet, but emotionally Claire had moved out long before her name was removed from their mailbox. And you know what's terrifying to men like him? Not rage, not confrontation, but indifference. Claire didn't flinch when he came home late. She didn't ask questions. She didn't argue. She simply stopped reacting, and in that silence he began to unravel. "You're being weird lately," he muttered one night, drunk on denial more than whiskey. Claire looked up from her laptop, her fingers still on the spreadsheet for her supplier orders. I mean, you never used to keep secrets," he added, trying to sound playful. She closed the laptop slowly. Her tone was calm. "That's because I used to think you were listening." There are moments when a woman becomes someone a man can no longer manipulate. It doesn't always happen with screaming. Sometimes it happens with a whisper. That was the night Thomas punched a hole in the wall. And that, too, was a gift. Because some men need to break things when they no longer have control. And Claire, she let him have his tantrum. She simply took the kids and left for her sisters that night, no shouting, no explaining. Just her keys, her bag, and her self-respect. You're thinking finally. But remember, leaving isn't the ending. Sometimes it's the beginning of a whole new war. The custody battle wasn't a battle. Claire had receipts, literal and emotional. Photos, bank statements, screenshots of messages between Thomas and Melissa. Documentation of his absences, the nights he forgot to pick up the kids, the missed birthdays. Thomas tried to play the victim. "She abandoned me," he cried in mediation. "She's not who she used to be." The lawyer didn't even look up from her file. "Correct. She's not. She evolved." That's the part that burns the most for a man like Thomas. Not that she left, but that she thrived without him. That the version of her who was once soft and small had grown teeth, had learned the art of walking away without flinching, had made something magnificent from the very ashes of his disdain. The bakery opened on a Tuesday. It was raining, and Claire expected maybe a few locals. Instead, a line wrapped around the block. Women young and old clutched umbrellas and Instagram screenshots. They came not just for the pastries, but for her. The woman who dared. The woman who didn't just dream, but defied. A local magazine wrote a piece, "The Woman Who Baked Her Way Out of Silence." When Thomas saw it, he threw the magazine across his apartment. Yes, his apartment, because he had to move out after Claire kept the house in the settlement. Ember and Flour made triple what his job did within its first quarter. She bought out the lease in full by year's end. And Melissa? She was gone. Disappeared the second Thomas became a man with consequences. But this story isn't about him anymore. No, this is about you. About every person who's ever been told they're too small, too soft, too ridiculous for daring to want something of their own. About the way we teach women to dim instead of blaze. About how power doesn't always look like a raised fist. Sometimes it looks like a woman quietly building her empire one croissant at a time. Thomas came by once. 3 months after the opening, he walked into Ember and Flour with that smirk he wore like armor. He ordered a coffee, tried to joke. "So this is it, huh? You finally made your little bake sale real?" Claire didn't flinch. She handed him the drink. "That'll be $4.50. No discount," he chuckled. She looked him dead in the eye. "Not for people who laughed at me." He left without a word, and she returned to her counter, to her customers, to her piece, like he was nothing more than a ghost passing through the home she'd built from his wreckage. Claire didn't seek revenge, she became it. Not with venom or violence, but with poise, the kind that unnerves those who once had the power to crush her. The kind that grows in women who've been underestimated for so long they begin to speak fluently in success. And Thomas, he began telling his version of the story. She changed, he'd say, over drinks with coworkers who didn't care, got cold, obsessed with her career. "I supported her, but she shut me out." You hear that? That's projection. A man rewriting the script where he's still the misunderstood lead. It's easier to accuse her of becoming cold than to admit he once mocked the fire she now cooks with. But here's the truth, Claire didn't get cold. She got clear. She stopped begging for warmth from someone who only ever handed her ice. She stopped offering pieces of herself in exchange for crumbs of attention. And most of all, she stopped waiting to be chosen. She chose herself. And yet it wasn't all clean and easy. Don't make the mistake of thinking strength means absence of pain. There were nights she cried silently on the floor of her bakery after close hands still dusted with flour. Not for Thomas, but for the woman she used to be. The one who thought being good meant being small. The one who thought love meant sacrificing herself at the altar of someone else's comfort. Grief doesn't just come when people die. It comes when illusions do. But the beauty, Claire didn't stay there. Every time she cried, she rose. Like yeast in warm water, slow, quiet, but inevitable. And slowly she began to glow in places Thomas had dimmed. She redecorated the old house, repainted the bedroom walls a soft clay pink, replaced the cold gray sheets he always insisted on with linen the color of honey. She played jazz while cooking dinner. She invited joy back in like a long-lost friend. And the children. They noticed. They blossomed in her light. Her daughter began drawing bakeries with signs that read, "Mommy's Place." Her son would press his nose against the bakery glass after school and beam with pride. One day her daughter asked, "Why don't you get sad anymore?" Claire smiled and crouched down beside her. "Oh, sweet girl," she whispered, "I do get sad, but I don't stay there. I walk through it, like a storm, and I come out dry on the other side." You feel that, don't you? The difference between despair and depth. That's what Thomas never understood. That's what every person who mocked her missed. See, Claire had become something rare, a woman who had nothing left to prove, only something to offer. Her presence became a haven, her story a lantern. Yeah. Women began leaving notes at Ember and Flour, slips of paper with dreams scrawled across them. "I want to go back to school. I'm learning to say no. I'm finally divorcing him." Claire kept every note, tucked them in a wooden box near the register. A silent rebellion, a shrine of becoming. Thomas tried once more to win her back. He sent a message, a long, rambling apology laced with nostalgia, said he missed the old her, said he realized his mistakes, that he'd changed. Claire read it. once, twice, then deleted it. Because what do you say to someone who only wanted you when you were invisible? Some wounds don't deserve a bandage. Some stories deserve an ending, not a sequel. And that dear one is the twist. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about a woman who was buried beneath the weight of someone else's vision of her and who dug herself out with her own bare hands. The bakery now has 2 locations. She employs 6 women, all of whom once believed they weren't enough. Claire makes sure they know better. She no longer looks for approval in rooms where her soul was once denied oxygen. She no longer dims. She no longer waits. The woman who knows her worth doesn't beg, she watches. Then she rises.